Good morning from Panhandle Outdoors, America's only daily outdoor TV show. Your source for fishing, hunting, and information for folks who enjoy the great outdoors. Now sit back, relax. It's Panhandle Outdoors.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Panhandle Outdoors. I'm Winston Chester. Glad you're here this morning. We've got a big show coming up with a special guest in here. But first, let's take care of our weather, brought to us by Gulf Coast Air Conditioning up in Southport. Drew Pollard and hard-working crew up there. And today we'll be taking some toys up there to Waller Elementary, and we're excited about that. But here we go. We're looking at the high today, 74, low 62, and water temperature staying around 66 degrees. It's the river readings now the same way the last couple of days. You're looking at Apalachicola, Bluntstown, 7.2. It's like that the last couple of days, but look at the Choctawhatchee. It's falling out. It got up there pretty high for that rain. Actually reading a 7 foot this morning, but a good steady fall to it. So if you want to do some catfishing this weekend, be some good time to do it with that falling water like that. Take a look at our tide chart brought to us by Kent Forest Lawn here on 23rd Street. We're looking at strong tides today. The low tide is this morning at 6:50, and the high tide is tonight at 7:15. Really good tide. The wind's coming out of southeast at about 9. So it should be another beautiful day here in paradise. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. Our friend and fellow outdoorsman, Stan Cochran, is with us this morning.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
So good to have you back.
Good to see you.
We're sitting here talking about so much stuff, so go ahead.
No. Everything going good with you this
We're doing
Christmas
well.
season?
I told people yesterday I'm behind them on Christmas shopping. I just can't seem to get it going. But you told me you're doing good.
Well, no, I'm doing all right. I'm just trying to think about people, and one of the things I've done for members of my family, I hope it's okay to say this, is I give them a thing of shrimp. I buy 5, 6, 7 pounds of frozen shrimp, or freeze them, and then they like them. It's something they'll use. They're not going to stick it in the closet and
That's right.
and then give it away next year to somebody else. So anyway, but
that's a good idea.
Well, it's just trying to think of something that people will use. So, anyway, but anyway, things are going good, and been running back and forth trying to. My wife's mom's living with us now.
Okay.
She's 91 and a half, and then my mom's 95, or will be 95 in a couple of weeks.
They keep me all busy on it.
So I feel like I need some sort of geriatric license.
So you go. I know you go see your mom like every week or two on a regular basis.
Yeah, up in Jackson County, and in fact, she's got deer coming in her yard now. She backs up to 58 acres of woods, and I told Mom not long ago, I said, Mom, it's going to be easy to pick out a Christmas present for you this year. Now, she said, well, why is that? I said, because with all the deer coming in, I'm going to give you a crossbow and a deer stand and a shooting axe. She said, I'm not interested.
That'd be, tell her she might set a record at that age to shoot one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to show a picture tomorrow of a 5-year-old girl getting one with a crossbow. So we could show that and then show your mom at a 95-year-old, so that would be.
Well, I don't think she's going to do that, but I made a picture of 4 bucks in her yard one day.
Wow!
And it was 2 8-points and a 6-point and another deer, smaller deer coming in, and I just was astounded. But they get run over. She lives near a busy road, and they get run over occasionally. People, fly by. And,
to explain to her she'd be getting them out of the misery instead of getting run over by a car.
It's just,
I know.
in the edge of town like that, the deer are everywhere. They proliferated, and done well. But
it's funny,
anyway.
you know your deer, and we talked about that before, how many deer are around the neighborhoods and all.
That's exactly right.
And
Yep, that's exactly right.
I had one of our friends, Drew Pollard, one of our sponsors. He last time.
And I know Drew. Drew's a great guy. And I'm glad he's the sponsor for your show.
Yes, and in fact, we're going to toys today. It's his company. They got all these toys up Saturday night, and we're going to take them to Waller today.
Right.
But Drew, last time he was on, he talked about he'd been deer hunting up in Maryland. I said, Maryland?
Maryland.
I said, I've never heard anybody go to Maryland. He explained that they actually go to the neighborhoods and knock on people's doors and get permission and hunt in their basically backyard up in the woods. And he had some nice bucks they've gotten. He and his high school buddies. Isn't that interesting?
I was watching a YouTube thing recently where a group of guys actually hunt of all places, in Savannah, Georgia. Really? And they knock on doors. Well, and people, these deer come into town and eat people's azaleas and gardens, and people don't want them. And they give them permission to hunt in their yard.
And they go in with a bow.
They go in there with a bow where, you don't have to worry about a gun or anything.
That's interesting.
And I'm telling you, you would be amazed at what these guys did. And apparently it's all over the country like that.
It must be catching on really fast.
Yeah.
So.
Well, some cities have taken steps to stop it, but I don't understand why, because if you're just controlling deer, but
well, that's one of those win-win situations. You're getting a deer, and the landowners are getting one pest.
Getting rid of a pest that eats their bushes.
That's right.
Their bushes off to the ground. Right.
Now, speaking of deer, you still scoring them?
Yeah, I still Winston recently. In fact, I went through training, hard to believe now, in the dark ages. I went through training in 1986 with Boone Crockett and Pope and Young. Mm-hmm. They actually brought a semi-trailer to Tallahassee in those days, and they trained a bunch of us, and I'm one of the original group they trained, and a lot of them got out of it and don't score anymore, but I've kept up my certification over the years, and I'm still listed, and I still have people call me. And recently, a local guy, his name is John, let me make sure I get this right, John Timpson. Some of you may know John. He goes by Jeff. Some of you may know Jeff. He used to work at Half Hitch, but he killed a phenomenal deer in Indiana. And I thought he killed it with a bow. He actually killed it with a crossbow. Okay. You were mentioning crossbows a minute ago, how far they've come, but he killed a buck. It had 20 measurable points. It was basically a 7x7 that had 3 points on each side that were abnormal points. It had over 239 inches of measurable points.
Good.
And it had almost 40 inches of deductions. It actually scored better as a non-typical buck than it did as a typical. It scored 199 and 3/8 as a typical, and it scored actually as a non-typical, it scored 214, which is just off the charts. But I don't know if we've got a picture.
We're going to have
a picture of that.
We're going to take a break and then come back and show you this picture of this phenomenal deer that Stan's talking about. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. I want to say a special good morning to Ann and Hastings Shaw up there in Ponce de Leon. Watch the show every morning. We appreciate the viewership. Before we get back to Stan now, we've got all kinds of things coming up. We have giveaways tomorrow, but let's go ahead and look at this picture Stan is talking about. This is a phenomenal.
This is the deer that Jeff killed. He killed it actually in Indiana, but it just a phenomenal deer. Was killed on private property. But just a phenomenal deer, and just not, like I said, it wasn't a deer killed locally.
Wow.
You just don't see deer like that. Yeah. But Winston, one thing to notice too is that he had a skull cut done on these. In other words, if you go hunt out of state now, and it doesn't matter what any of the elk, the mule deer, white-tailed deer, antelope, all of that sort of stuff, you can't bring them whole back to Florida. You've got to. It doesn't really matter anymore. You don't want to do that. You can get in trouble. But there's a disease that's found in some places called chronic wasting disease. It's found in the bone marrow and the brain material, and we don't want to get it started here in Florida. We don't have it in Florida. We don't want to get it started in Florida. And so that's why these rules are in place. So you have to bone out the meat, do a skull cut, get rid of the brain matter, all that stuff, leave it there and dispose of it however they tell you there, but don't bring it back into Florida. And that way, it's a win for everybody, and it's easier to transport too if you do that. So anyway,
that's good.
Yep. But Winston, I mentioned about scoring. Also, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, I scored a bighorn sheep for a lady a couple of weeks ago, and
here's the score sheet. I was going to show you. The sheep. Okay.
I don't have the photo, and I wished I had the photo, but it was just the most amazing story. She called me from Tallahassee and asked me if I would score the sheep for her, and I said, "Ma'am, listen," I said, I was trained to score them, but I have scored one bighorn sheep since 1986. And I said, I will if you want me to, but there are others. She said, well, I called FWC in Tallahassee, and they told me that if you could do it, if anybody could.
Do it, Stan Cook.
Well, I appreciate the confidence, but, man, I said, okay, so I went back and I read everything in its volume. Is what you got to read, and read everything to make sure I didn't forget anything. And she brought this sheep over, and it was just from where the horns curl around. It was almost 20 inches between where the horns curl around. I bet the horns themselves weighed 50, 60 pounds. Oh. Her husband, she's, I think, probably in her maybe mid-30s. I'm not even going to call her name. Maybe she's a little older, but anyway, her husband helps her, and they put in for these permits. Well, she got a permit actually in New Mexico, and he went out there. He flew out there on July the 4th last year. She had been pulled for a permit, and it is a rare opportunity to get pulled for one of these permits. So she got pulled for a permit to kill a bighorn sheep. He goes out there and parks at 6,000 feet or so, and it takes him a couple of days to get up to 13,000 feet up on the top of a mountain range.
Wow. And
he found some sheep, and he saw what he thought was a shooter ram, a big ram. So he comes down, comes back to Tallahassee, tells her. Well, then they get sick with COVID. This is in July. And so she's got this permit, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And so she recovered, she and her husband, it took them a while. They recovered well enough to be able to satisfy all the rules about flying and all of that, and they flew out to New Mexico, rented a car, drove back up in this area, parked, and then she said it took them over 2 days. Plus,
climbing.
She said, plus they didn't feel good, the high altitude, the thin air, and then they finally find this same bunch of sheep, and she ends up making a shot from 300 yards.
Oh my goodness!
I've never shot at anything that far, and she kills this ram, and that was the ram that I ultimately scored, and then it took them forever.
They had to take it down. I mean,
it was over 300 pounds.
Oh my goodness!
And it took them forever then to get it off. And she told me, she said she was glad, she was glad she did it and all. But I know it had to be incredible. But one of the things that was really interesting is there's a metal tag that's inserted. The New Mexico Game and Fish biologists actually drill a hole into the bottom of the jaw, up underneath in the plate or palate of the sheep, and they insert a aluminum plate or aluminum tag, and that tag is there. That's what this number is that you see right here.
Okay.
It says plug number. And when I first read all the stuff, I said, what is a plug number? I've scored and I couldn't remember from the training from 40 years ago. I couldn't remember what the plug number was, and then of course I looked at it. I knew exactly what it was. But anyway, it was just an incredible. her sheep was so large. He was over 9 years old, and you can see that because of the rings on they're like growth rings on a tree.
Okay.
But
cool.
Anyway,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And what a challenge and what a memorable trip. It's challenging enough to go up there just when you're healthy, but having COVID and then 300 yards, wow, that's
hold a gun steady.
Hold it steady. That is something. What a great story.
And that it was so large. It's not only makes what they call the 3-year book, but it makes the all-time book for trophies and so she'll be listed ultimately. And I want to say her name, but I don't have permission to use her name.
Okay,
so I'm not going.
That is fine. Anyway. But it's from Tallahassee area.
Yeah, from the Tallahassee area.
Okay, sounds great.
Very nice young lady.
Good deal. We're going to take our final break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, folks. Let's take a look at our fishing game times today, brought to us by Blue Water Outriggers in Port St. Joe. Our time is 8:42 to 10:42 this morning, and this evening from 9:05 to 11:05. Ken Paramore called me the other day, wanted me to mention about the National Wild Turkey Federation calendar, and I'll let Stan elaborate on it, but there's some great pictures in it, and so tell us how this works.
You get, for $50, you get a calendar. The calendar, they're giving away a gun. When you buy a calendar, on the back of this has got a little registration card that's got to be filled out and returned to us, and then every one of those are put into a drawing, and they're giving away one gun each week of the year. It's a pretty sweet deal. And so I got one encouraging people to do that. It will ultimately benefit our chapter, the Florida Wild Turkey Federation, and anyway, the state chapter here for the National Wild Turkey Federation, I should say. So anyway,
and we're talking about save the habitat. We're
right,
talking, and you
that
know
money goes right
from around here, growing up around here, and all the habitat, how critical it is, especially in the Panhandle. A lot of other parts of the state, it's gone, but.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we encourage people, and of course I'm retired now, but one of the things we encourage people to do is thin your places. That's why there used to be so many turkeys years ago when cattle roamed freely, is they kept the underbrush down. And turkeys don't like a ton of underbrush. They don't like that. And so if you keep the underbrush down, burning's one way to do that. There's all kind of equipment that you can use, but one of the things that we did that people really latched onto in Holmes County was when we had the restocking program back in the 90s up there, was they understood that, and they really stepped up and got the habitat in great shape, and those birds did well.
Yes, they did.
Very, very well.
That was a great testimonial to the program of what it did. Well,
exactly.
we're in December now. Christmas is right around the corner. Then comes some serious hunting.
Oh yeah. People are looking for cold weather, and hopefully that cold weather will be here. We mentioned hunting. There's everything now too. If people haven't noticed, you need to go back and go to the FWC website. I know people as they get older, like myself, we don't like to use a computer. But if you'll go into the website, if you've got a phone, go to FWC, the website. You'll see that we've got 2 zones, deer zones here, and basically I-10 separates the deer zones. You've got deer management. The deer zone 1 is below the interstate, and deer zone, the second zone is DMU2, as they call it, is north of the interstate. And the antler rules are a little different on private, and I'm talking about private land. They're a little different on private land. You've got just basically have they've just got to have 2 points south, but on north of the interstate, for it to be a legal buck deer, they've got to have 3 points, 3 antler points, and then you're supposed to report them. Right. I don't know how many people do that, but this is something fairly new. It's only been in effect now a couple of years, but you're supposed to report your deer. So anyway. And
it looks like it's going to be a serious time after Christmas, if people really get out in the woods, hopefully.
They do,
I had you're talking about scoring here, and you're talking about you were trained in 1986. Let me ask you this: before that period of time, there were other guys doing it. Were they trained by the same people? I always wonder, when did the FWC start scoring?
Well, the way we got into it as an agency was with we started something called the Florida Buck Registry.
Well, I remember that.
And the Buck Registry is still running today. So we had people that were trying to learn how to do this, and then we actually, at the time, it's interesting, we had 1.5 scores in Florida for Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young. And I always said, what is 1.5? And they said, well, it was, the 1.5 was one person who was trained, and then we had a Yankee who lived in Ohio that was trained, and he spent 6 months in Florida and 6 months in Ohio.
Okay,
and I said, okay, that makes sense. But anyway, it was a guy that split his time. So then Boone and Crockett, it was a guy named Jack Nesbitt, and he remains a dear friend today. Jack was the one that spearheaded the move to come to Florida, and they brought, like I say earlier, this trailer load of stuff from deer antlers to elk antlers to antelope horns to bighorn sheep. I mean, you name it, skulls of bear, grizzly bear, Alaskan brown bear,
oh my goodness,
all of this kind of stuff.
Cool.
Cougar skulls, and so we spent a block of time with each one of those, and they tried to make sure we were proficient. And of course, a lot of the stuff, Winston, you just got to do it. And I'm telling you, over the years, I have seen some interesting things happen.
I bet you have. We have to come back on later and tell us some of those things. We're about to run out of time, but that's an interesting history of how the scoring started, because I often wondered how it really got started.
But it's really the Florida Buck Registry is what gave the impetus to
that's
this.
Cool. Well, Stan, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Winston.
And,
thank you.
We'll be checking with you later. Folks, y'all have a great day today. Do something good today for your fellow man, and God bless.
Thanks for watching America's only daily outdoor TV show, Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester, featuring hunting, fishing, and other activities and information to help you enjoy the great outdoors. Join us next time for Panhandle Outdoors.